England did not become powerful because it was gentle. It became powerful because it learned to break with what constrained it and replace obedience with control. When I came of age, the kingdom was still uncertain of itself, still haunted by civil war, still cautious of strong rule. Stability was fragile, authority was negotiated. I did not intend to negotiate with history. I intended to command it. I am Henry VIII of England, and this is how the Tudor monarchy hardened into power, how loyalty was redefined, how faith was reshaped by authority, and how a kingdom learned to revolve around its crown. I was not born to rule at first. My brother Arthur was meant to wear the crown. I was raised as a spare, educated broadly, trained in theology, languages, music, and sport. I learned how kings should think, not how they should rule. That distinction mattered. When Arthur died, the weight of succession shifted suddenly onto me. England had only recently escaped the Wars of the Roses. The Tudor name was young, its claim to the throne still questioned. My father, Henry VII, ruled through caution, calculation, and restraint. He secured the crown through marriage, treaties, and financial control. He left me a stable kingdom, but also a fragile one, dependent on continuity and perception. When I became king, I inherited not just a throne, but an expectation. England wanted strength, nobles wanted favor, Europe watched for weakness. I was young, confident, and determined not to rule like my father. Where he saved, I spent. Where he hesitated, I acted. I believed kingship was not merely stewardship, it was dominance made visible. At the beginning of my reign, I sought glory in the old way. War against France offered tradition and prestige. A king proved himself on the battlefield, surrounded by banners and armor, admired by allies and feared by rivals. My campaigns achieved limited success, but they taught me something important. Glory is expensive, temporary, and dependent on forces a king does not fully control. True power lies elsewhere. I ruled through ministers before I ruled alone. Cardinal Wolsey became the engine of my early government. He managed diplomacy, finance, and administration with ruthless efficiency. Through him, England projected influence beyond its size. I learned that power does not require constant visibility. It requires systems that function relentlessly. But I also learned a more dangerous lesson. A king who relies too heavily on servants risks appearing secondary to them. My reign changed irrevocably over a matter that seemed at first personal. My marriage to Catherine of Aragon had produced no surviving male heir. A dynasty without a clear successor invites chaos. I had seen what disputed succession did to England. I would not allow it again. I sought an annulment. Rome hesitated. The Pope delayed, constrained by politics and the influence of Catherine's nephew, the Emperor Charles V. In that hesitation, I saw something unforgivable. If a king must beg permission to secure his dynasty, then he is not sovereign. That realization reshaped everything. I did not break with Rome out of sudden irreligion. I was a defender of the faith before I was its reformer. I broke with Rome because authority divided is authority weakened. England could not be fully ruled if its king answered, even spiritually, to a foreign power. The matter of my marriage exposed a deeper truth. Control over the church was control over legitimacy, law, land, and loyalty. With the support of men like Thomas Cromwell, I moved deliberately. Parliament was not bypassed, it was weaponized. Laws were passed, authority was transferred.
The Act of Supremacy declared what I already understood to be necessary. I was the supreme head of the Church of England. Faith, governance, and obedience were unified under the crown. This was not merely religious reform, it was a redistribution of power. Monasteries were dissolved, their wealth flowed to the crown and to those loyal to it. The old religious institutions that had rivaled royal authority for centuries were dismantled, legally, systematically, and permanently. Resistance was crushed. Some died for their defiance, others adapted. The message was clear. Conscience could exist, but only within the boundaries set by the king. The Tudor monarchy hardened in this moment. Authority was no longer shared with Rome. Loyalty was no longer divided between crown and church. The king became the central axis of English life. Marriage, once a diplomatic tool, became a political instrument of survival. Each union was shaped by the same fear that drove my break with Rome, the fear of instability. I married for heirs, for alliances, for hope. Some wives failed me, others threatened me. I responded as kings do when survival outweighs sentiment. Love does not preserve dynasties, control does. As my reign continued, my rule changed. Youth gave way to suspicion. Threats multiplied, real and imagined. Rebellion followed reform. The pilgrimage of grace showed that many did not accept the new order quietly. I answered firmly. Mercy encourages repetition. Authority, once challenged, must be reasserted or it dissolves. I governed through fear as much as loyalty. Nobles learned that proximity to power was dangerous. Favor could elevate, but it could also destroy. Ministers rose and fell. Wolsey failed me and fell. Cromwell served me brilliantly and fell. I did not destroy them out of whim. I destroyed them because power requires clarity. When service becomes liability, it must end. England, meanwhile, transformed. Governance became more centralized. Law extended further into daily life. The monarchy grew more personal, more absolute, more visible. The king's will shaped policy, faith, and future. This concentration of power created strength, but it also created dependence. The state increasingly reflected the temperament of its ruler. Foreign powers adjusted. England was no longer merely a peripheral kingdom. It was unpredictable, assertive, and internally unified. The Tudor crown no longer relied solely on ancestry. It relied on control of institutions. That was its true innovation. In my later years, my body weakened, but my authority did not soften. Age sharpened my defensiveness. I trusted less. I punished faster. The court learned caution. Silence became survival. Yet the machinery of rule continued to function. Succession, once my greatest fear, was secured. The dynasty would continue. When I died, England did not collapse. That was the measure of success. The Tudor monarchy endured because it had been reshaped into something stronger than tradition alone. The crown no longer balanced competing authorities, it dominated them. History judges me harshly or generously, depending on where it stands. Some remember wives and executions, others remember reform and consolidation. Both miss the point. I did not seek to be loved, I sought to be obeyed. I turned a fragile dynasty into a centralized state. I severed England from external control and forced loyalty inward. I made the monarchy unavoidable. That was the rise of Tudor power, and it bore my name.